Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Louisiana ITEP Changes, an overview of Governor Jeff Landry's new executive order, hosted by Advantous Consulting. Our moderator today, Mr. Jason DeCuir, co-owner and partner of Advantous Consulting and founding partner of Advantous Law, will first be joined by Louisiana Economic Development Secretary Bourgeois and Executive Counsel Robin Porter. In the second half of the webinar, he will be joined by Will Green, President and CEO of Louisiana Association of Business and Industry, Greg Bowser, President and CEO of Louisiana Chemical Association, and Tommy Faucheux, President of Louisiana Mid-Continent Oil and Gas Association. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please use the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. Jason will cover the questions submitted at the end of the webinar. Without further ado, we will turn it over to Jason.
Well, thank you, Jenna, and thank you everyone for joining today. Advantous webinar featuring the new ITEP changes that Governor Jeff Landry just promulgated. But first and foremost, I want to say Happy New Year, but I look at my calendar and it's already March 1st. So the year is flying by. We just finished a special session dealing with crime, and we're about to start the regular session. And Governor Landry made no mistake about it that he was going to begin to start dabbling in tax changes even before we got to some of the fiscal sessions, which would occur next year. And just last Wednesday at the lobby annual meeting, Governor Jeff Landry did just that. At the podium, he decided to issue an executive order changing the current ITEP program that we have been dealing with since the previous governor, Governor John Bel Edwards, signed into effect back in 2016. So for purposes of today's webinar, we're going to do a couple of things. To get us kicked off, we're going to kind of show you a few slides and talk about the history of ITEP, the changes that were made when John Bel Edwards promulgated his executive order, all the way to last Wednesday when Governor Jeff Landry promulgated the new executive order. We'll show you the differences therein, the major differences. And then obviously we will have, very excited to have Secretary Bourgeois, as well as her executive counsel, Robin Porter. They will obviously have the challenge of clarifying all of the terms and statements in the executive order, as well as eventually going through a rule promulgation process, which will hope to bring more clarity to the executive order. I will go ahead and I will, in typical lawyer fashion, I will share a disclaimer now and throughout that we do not have all the answers to the provisions within the executive order. We realize there could be some ambiguities, some provisions that need to be potentially more clear. That will happen, and this process will be very iterative, very fluid. Advantous has a lot of history in helping and being a part of the process. We were very involved, not with the policy tenets of the Governor John Bel's executive order, but at least bringing to LED and other stakeholders issues that we saw therein so that we could have the best product possible. But these things, we will try to give you our thoughts and opinions, but at the end of the day, these things will have to be clarified through the rule promulgation process with LED, and obviously with the BCNI being a big part of that. As you see the first slide here, excited to have these guests join me. After talking with the secretary, as you can imagine, to even have her join us, very appreciative, but their schedule has just been crazy. And they're not going to be able to stay on the full hour. They will be able to join us for about 15 or 20 minutes. I do see that they are on here, and thank you, Madam Secretary. Thank you, Ms. Porter, as well. And then they will be able to kind of give you their thoughts. Maybe we'll get into a couple of provisions within the ITEP order, and then they will have to log off and go handle the rest of the state's business as well. So just to begin, let me just briefly, since they're on here, want to get to them. Let me briefly get through some of the slides that we have. I am trying to click here. Mary, I may have to have you manually click All right, just a quick timeline. And I think many of you know this, particularly if you have been a part of applying or filing in advance for ITEP. ITEP began in 1936. Some people think just under the previous governor, ITEP, just no, ITEP's been around for a long time. We had 80 years of ITEP without a change. In 2016, as I mentioned, Governor John Bell came in and he promulgated an executive order. Executive orders can be done at the free reign of the governor. He promulgated the first executive order, JBE 2016, number 26, in June. And then later, as you can tell, sometimes these things are difficult. More questions came in from stakeholders. He wanted to attempt to clarify it even more. JBE 2016-73 was promulgated later that year in October. And that is what was known as the ITEP program, obviously until last Wednesday, Governor Jeff Landry promulgated the new executive order. After Governor John Bell promulgated that executive order, they then went to the rules process. 2 sets of rules were promulgated, one set in 2017, another set later in 2018. As you can see, an iterative process as new things come up. Sometimes it requires new rules to be promulgated. This is when the ITEP process began to involve local governments, and local governments having what we know as a say and a recommendation into the approval process, as well as what is known as the 80-20 split, okay? That now you get up to 80% and 20% will not be abated or exempted. And those were the big major changes, including John Bell Edwards having also promulgated a jobs requirement, which we will get into. And then last Wednesday, as you can see at the bottom of the slide, 2024, last Wednesday, Governor Jeff Landry signed Executive Order JML 24-23. So the John Bell order, I kind of hit this. What did it do? It created a CEA with the state and LED so that job creation and retention became a part of what was required to get approval. It additionally gave local government entities a say in the approval process, and then it also created what is known as the 80-20 split. For those of you who do not know, the ITEP is embedded in the Constitution. This is in the Constitution, which is why it requires an executive order, and you really cannot do much statutorily because obviously a statute cannot trump the Constitution. But the words of art here that everybody refers to, as you read through the main provision, it says, with the approval of the governor, meaning the governor has to approve it, and what he deems as, quote, the best interest of the state. The best interest of the state is the provision that is hotly debated. And what does it mean? How broad is it? Obviously, the previous governor interpreted to mean he could write his own executive order and do what he thinks is in the best interest of the state. Now, Governor Jeff Landry is using this provision and has promulgated the new executive order of what he sees is the best interest of the state. But that is the provision that is embedded in the Constitution that does give the governor fairly broad authority. If we put these two executive orders side by side, you can see the first bullet point, JBE 80-20 split with the option to renew for another 5 years at 80%. Most people know ITEP as 10 years, but how it works, it's 5 years, and then you get a renewal for another 5 years if it's so approved. As you can see, the first bullet point in Governor Jeff Landry's executive order, that is retained. That does not change. The second bullet point is where we get to the first major change. Governor John Bell added a job creation retention requirement. Governor Jeff Landry has removed that requirement. And folks, for you all listening, obviously this program was about creating investment in the state. How do you compete for investment in the state? LED has plenty of other job creation tools, but obviously if you're attracting investment to the state, that investment has to be built out, it has to be constructed, that investment has to be managed through both direct and indirect jobs. The theory is if you can get it here, obviously jobs will then follow. Obviously, the third bullet point gave local government entities a say in the approval process. One of the issues was that process was varying from parish to parish. Parishes were going in, creating their own rules, their own processes, their own orders at the local level. Sometimes they were in conjunction and synonymous with the state rules, and sometimes they weren't. Created a little bit of confusion at the local level. Governor Jeff Landry is creating a local ITEP committee, and we'll get into it, that's comprised of 3 or 4 different entities at the local level, one approval process as opposed to 3. And then Governor Jeff Landry also clarifies that he will be the final decision maker if the local ITEP committee says they deny, but Board of Commerce and Industry obviously approved. This is important to know when it's in effect. Advance notifications filed on or before Jeff Landry last Wednesday, February 2024. Those were be governed by the old program, and then anything after that will follow the Governor Jeff Landry rules. And then ITEP projects approved before February 2024 also potentially governed by the old rules, anything after the new executive order. Lastly here, as I mentioned, the 4 members of the local ITEP committee, parish president or police jury, school board president or superintendent, sheriff or designee. And then if the project falls in a local municipality with a mayor, you could have that 4th member of the ITEP committee. And then you can have these other ex officio members, which is smart, local stakeholders, assessor, highest ranking economic development staff, members of local EDOs, and if no local EDO exists, a representative from the regional EDO. This is a great transition over to the secretary as well as to Ms. Porter. They issued this draft to stakeholders. I think it was issued this week. It kind of talks about the process that I just laid out here, all the way down to the new 45-day time period from when LED gives notice to the local ITEP committee, in which it has to approve at the local level, and then potentially the contract head back to the governor. And so you can see the secretary and Ms. Porter have already gone to work on this, trying to clarify the process and creating a draft. I want everybody to see that. It has the language of draft chart, meaning that subject to change as this process is iterative. So with that being said, Madam Secretary, appreciate you joining us. So glad to have you here. Ms. Porter as well, glad to have you join us. We have over 200 folks that are on here. So we want to give the floor to you, Madam Secretary, allow you to make some opening comments about the process. Of course, Robin, welcome and encourage you to do that as well. And then we'll get into a couple of questions that I know have been raised with the order. So Madam Secretary, I'll turn the floor over to you, but first and foremost, thank you for joining us today.
I'm happy to, and thank you, Jason, but now having sat in the last 5 minutes, I'm not really sure why you need us, because you did a dynamite job, right? A dynamite job of explaining a great deal of where we are. So what I think I would like to do, if it doesn't mess up your agenda too much, is take it a little bit high level for a few minutes and talk big picture economic development in the state under Governor Landry and what his vision for it is, and therefore what my vision is, and then how it relates to this ITEP decision and how we move forward, if that's okay with you.
That works, and I'm about to get myself in a lot of hot water with 200 people on here. So before she does that, Secretary Susan Bonnett Bourgeois has 3 decades of experience in building, transforming, and sustaining organizations through strategic planning, project development, fundraising, and advocacy. Prior to her appointment as LED Secretary, she served as president of SBB Consulting, president emeritus of the North Shore Community Foundation, having served as CEO for 17 years since its founding. Before launching the foundation, Secretary Bourgeois was president of Bonnett and Company, a governmental and public affairs consulting firm specializing in insurance interest and advocacy. Prior to her consultant, she had multiple roles for Louisiana Governor Mike Foster's administration, including Director of Administration Affairs and Special Assistant to the Governor. Secretary Bourgeois is an active member of the International Women's Forum and serves in leadership roles on several boards, including past chairman of GNO, board member of the North Shore Business Council, and Lakeview Regional Medical Center. Known for her visionary acumen, Secretary Bourgeois emphasizes innovation, collaboration, and meaningful alliances, all of which are critical components to creating thriving communities and a thriving state. She and her husband have 4 grown children and live in Covington. And the only thing that's not in here, I don't know when you have time to do anything else.
Well,
but extremely qualified, has experience with the state, and what a true blessing to have her now leading the LED agency.
Wow, Jason, thank you. And clearly you're an attorney who gets paid by the word, because we could have cut that down. And we're going to cut that down, but thank you. I appreciate that. And I, one of the weird things about Zoom is that you can all see me and I can't see you. So I don't like that. And I feel like I'm at a bit of a relational disadvantage in that space. But with that said, thank you, Jason, again, for the opportunity for us to be here for a few minutes with y'all to tell you sort of philosophically where we are, and then specifically where we believe we are going. First and foremost, Jeff Landry wants to be, and I think we can all very much expect him to be, an economic development governor. He first and foremost knows the opportunities that Louisiana has, and is frustrated that we don't seem to be capitalizing on all that we could be. So we have all secretaries, this is not just unique to us, all departments within state government have been charged with making Louisiana more competitive, making Louisiana better, making it easier for businesses, individuals, families, all of us to thrive, frankly. And a huge part of that work is removing barriers. State government tends to make it harder for people and businesses to do things that perhaps in other states they wouldn't have to battle. And so removing barriers is a tremendous part of our philosophical direction that the governor has given us all. So big picture here in the department, I'm going to give you a few minutes and then we'll talk ITEP specifically. There are a lot of incredibly good things going on in Louisiana, and that's a message that we perhaps don't hear as much as we need to. So there is immense amount of opportunity, and part of what I have been charged with in being appointed as secretary here is restructuring how we do economic development in Louisiana, both how our department is governed, how we move forward from sort of a governance perspective, but also internally. So philosophically for us inside the department, there are 2 key words that are going to be fundamentally important to everything that we do. Number one, if you were at the lobby meeting a few weeks ago, you heard me say this. At the end of the day, we simply want to win. Louisiana is a state that wants to win. We do not want to be in the business of just accepting what we're handed. We want to compete, and most importantly, we want to win. So win is going to be one of those words you hear a lot. And another word you're going to hear a lot is that we're going to say yes, and we're not going to say no, but. That philosophically is how this department is going to operate moving forward. So a little bit in the weeds for you. There are 3 important things happening as we speak in LED from a restructure perspective. Number one, how business development is handled in Louisiana is going to be completely reimagined. We have great people on this team. We're going to build out that team even further to be hungry and aggressive about bringing new and innovative opportunities to Louisiana. So business development will be completely reimagined. Number 2, starting today is her first day. We have somebody on staff. It's Rachel Shields, the former chief of staff from GNO Inc. If y'all know her, many of you on this call probably do. Rachel starts officially today, and her primary role in this organization is to formalize relationships and engagements with the private sector. For us to try to reinvent inside of state government all the things that you on this call are good at is foolish and wasteful. And so Rachel's primary role is going to be leveraging and maximizing those relationships in formal ways to make Louisiana the winner in the long run. And the third thing is that we are going to get much better at storytelling. Louisiana in general, LED in specific, has great stories to tell, and we have a great narrative. You just don't know it yet, and that's a problem. And so that is going to turn on its head. And the way we message our opportunity, the way we message our positioning, and the way we message our attitude about all things economic development in Louisiana is changing. So those are the three things that are happening as we speak. So those are the philosophical components. Now let's talk specifically why y'all are on this webinar. The governor made it very clear, again, about removing barriers. So when I say Jeff Landry moves at the speed of business, I'm telling you Jeff Landry moves at the speed of business because I got a phone call one afternoon that said, Susan, I'm ready to do ITEP and I'm doing it today, right? Here are the and he did. And the next day is when we signed it. So here are the fundamentals as Jason covered with you. But what I want everyone to hear is there one or two, and Robin will tell you all this specifically. Right now, there are really only one or two absolutes, right? Everything else is going to have to be the meat that we put on this skeleton in rulemaking and in the process in the next few months. And Jason, I appreciate the slides you put up about the original rulemaking in the John Bell days and then the subsequent rulemaking. This will be an iterative process just as much of this is. So here's what we know are the absolutes. The governor, as Jason said, has removed the jobs requirement for ITEP. Fundamentally, ITEP is a capital investment program. It is encouraging significant capital investment that would not happen but for this program. The jobs requirement in his perspective, and I agree, was a complication and an additional barrier to making this program work the way it was designed to work. So we're removing the jobs requirement. We have lots of incentives that are built around producing and creating quality jobs in Louisiana. Those remain, however, those remain separate. Secondly, the local piece. After a lot of consideration, and I will tell you, many of you on this call probably understand, there are a lot of varying opinions about the local piece. He agreed that the locals have say in this, and he simplified it. And at the end of the day, that's what people were clamoring for. It was not about our local communities not having an opinion. It is a very important opinion for them, but the prior way we were doing it was making it so burdensome and difficult, and in many respects almost prohibitive for companies to deal with every single individual local entity. So the way he streamlined the local piece, which again will continue to be formalized in rulemaking, is going to make it easier for companies to know what they're dealing with and what the process is to deal with them. And then, was there a third, Robin? I'm looking at you.
Yes, the two definitions that I was going to discuss today was job creation and retention. We know will not be included in the rules. And also a definite is there will be a rule change. So those are the two definites that we have for today.
Oh, and the other piece, there is another definite that's separate but related. The governor is in the process as we speak of making his appointments for the Board of Commerce and Industry, who is ultimately charged, as you saw in the constitutional wording that Jason showed you, who's ultimately charged with promulgating these rules. The governor made it clear that, as the Constitution says, he maintains final authority in this space. But that Board of Commerce and Industry is empowered with this rulemaking, and that is the process we begin now.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Well, look, and as Robin comes in this conversation as well, I want to make sure, because Robin, Miss Porter, people may not know you as well. Ms. Porter is a result-oriented general counsel, business executive, and managing partner licensed to practice law with more than 30 years of extensive diversified experience in residential mortgage lending and servicing, banking regulatory compliance, and commercial transactions. Prior to her current position as executive counsel for LED, she served as general counsel for major residential mortgage lending corporation, executive vice president, management partner of a top-tier multi-state commercial and residential mortgage banking law firm, chief compliance officer for a multi-state residential mortgage lending and servicing corporation, funded over $30 billion of home loans, service loans with over $12 billion in funding. Ms. Porter's unique combination of high-tech training and legal experience lends itself to her ability to effectively navigate as executive counsel for the Department of Louisiana Economic Development. So you can see they're very qualified, and Ms. Porter, having sat in the shoes of LED for revenue for some years, I also know what you're up against on a daily basis. So my blessings also go out to you as well. I think we're hitting on some keynotes here, and appreciate your overview and tapping in to some of those provisions. One of the questions that I know that we have been getting, and if it's helpful, we can put the slide back up that way, the draft that y'all sent around, which
That's
kind of
great.
that defines the process. But while I do that, one of the initial thoughts are questions that was out there. Is the first stop still BCNI, and then it goes to the local ITEP committee? And then part two of that, if BCNI approves, local ITEP committee denies, how will it be handled after that? And let either one of you address that.
Yes, Jason, what we perceive at this point early in the game is that the first stop will still be the Board of Commerce and Industry. And as we go through this flow chart, this is what I perceive to be about the same, and then we're going to have some tweaks. So the advance notification will still be filed. We're still going to obtain the application. Once the application is received, it'll be vetted by LED, sent to LDR to obtain either an objection or a letter of no objection. Once we receive the letter of no objection, the application is prepped for the board, placed on the agenda, submitted to the Board of Commerce and Industry for approval or whatever the decision.
Yeah.
And then once that happens, the tweak here is at this point, the notification will be to the local ITEP committee or review committee, and that begins the 15-day notice period. If you recall, Jason, currently the notice period is 30 days. So that's been shortened by 15 days. And also, we don't have the local assessors, 3 or 4 local taxing authorities. It's one centralized, streamlined committee where the approvals will go. Okay, so during that 15-day notice, there's an opportunity for either the locals to opt into the approval within that 15-day period, or they can notify LED that they want to schedule, a meeting, a public meeting. So if the public meeting, we are notified that the public meeting is going to happen, we then obtain a 30-day add-on to that 15 days. So in essence, a total of 45 days. So currently, it's a 60-day, but there's a 45-day period now.
And let me interject this from a philosophical perspective. That was really important to the governor to shorten that. The 45 is the tightest we could get it within the provisions of law. If it were up to him, that would have been about 36 hours, right? So that is the tightest we could get it. And that speed to market piece is critically important to him from a making government function perspective. So that's why that's 45 days, and that's the least it can be.
Yes, streamline of the process, facilitated easily.
And that's really key. And I know it kind of runs under the radar a little bit. One, we're going from 3 entities to 1, and we're shortening the timeline. And what I'm hearing you say, Robin, is if they don't notice that meeting within the first 15 days, we're done there. We don't even have to wait the 30 minutes because local governments decided they opted out, essentially, right?
Correct. There's still that opt-in provision. And if on day 16, if there's no notification, it will be deemed approved. And you're right, Jason, if there is, approval at the board level and is disapproved at the local level, then that decision, unlike currently, would be appealed back to the board that's already approved. At this point, it will go to the governor for the decision. Streamline, easily facilitate.
I think people are glad to hear that you won't have to make that extra stop because Board of Commerce has already expressed their intent. Want to do, go straight to the governor, and that fits within the narrative that the secretary is mentioning, streamlining that process and getting these decisions done quicker.
Right.
So that's terrific. I know y'all touched on this, but I'll throw it out there. I've got a lot of calls. Jason, we don't see in the executive order where it does not specifically say or it does specifically say that jobs are not required. But Robin, maybe this is more for you. Since the new executive order was issued and it's not a requirement for jobs in the new executive order, then essentially that means it's not required because the old executive order eventually would not be in effect. Is that how you?
You're correct. The new executive order supersedes John Bel Edwards' order. So there was no need to include that in the current order because Landry's order supersedes John Bell's order. And also the job retention and creation requirement will not be included in the rules, when the rules are promulgated. So it will not be included.
No, very good. Well, look, 2 more questions and I'm going to let you all go because I know y'all are on a short time commitment and appreciate your time here. The first one, I know we talk a lot about rule promulgation,
Right.
And to the extent that y'all have anything you want to share in terms of what a timeline may be, I do know that with all governors, there's typically the Board of Commerce and Industry. You could have a new makeup, new members, that sort of thing. But at a high level, how do y'all envision the process playing out?
Okay, so we have 2 tracks going. One, the regular rules promulgation process. So typically from the date of publication for the notice of intent through adoption, that's typically, I'm through air quotes there, 6 months, Jason, about 6 months for that process. You're going to have between that time at least 2 public meetings where the public has an opportunity to provide comment and so forth for the standard rule promulgation process. At the same time, since the board has been commanded to promulgate the rules, they're going to have to meet, which the next board meeting is April 24th, I believe. And assuming that there's a quorum, my assumption at that meeting is that there will be a creation of the Rules Committee. So the Rules Committee, they are also going to require meetings, and those meetings are public as well and subject to open meetings law. So tentatively, what I know we will have ready is a draft of the rules when the Rules Committee is formulated. So we'll have that to be able to hand to them at that time. My assumption is, as you know, I don't speak for the board, but an assumption is once the Rules Committee is created, soon thereafter, I would assume that they're going to have a committee meeting. So we're looking at probably the notice of intent being published maybe May-ish, and that's tentative.
Okay. No,
Because that gives the board an opportunity to at least have some input on the rules.
Yeah. All right. That gives great insight. And so my last question, in a true lawyer fashion, I'm gonna kind of break it in A and B, so I can stick another question in there. One, if y'all are prepared to say, will the ITEP committee will it have to be unanimous or majority? I know it could be 4 members, it could be 3 members. Do y'all suspect it to be unanimous? They all have to give thumbs up, or would it be majority? And then the last question deals with just stakeholder engagement. Secretary, I know you mentioned that's a big deal for you, educating stakeholders and all of the groups that have to interact with LED. Obviously, we're doing that today, and I'm sure Rachel is a great pickup. Look forward to working with her in this new capacity. Do you have other ideas out there that you're prepared to talk about of how you plan to engage stakeholders, whether it be about ITEP or just some of the other big ticket things you mentioned that you want to do with the agency?
All right, so I'm gonna let Robin answer one, because question A, which you were nodding no to.
Right, we're, at this time, Jason, we're not ready to talk about
Yeah.
whether majority.
Yeah, it's all part of the rulemaking, right? So, secondarily, the organizations that work in this space day in and day out, y'all obviously are a firm that does it, but they're, lobby, obviously you're close to lobby. There are a number of organizations that work in the private public space that we will engage with. We will have this exact same conversation with whoever wants to have this conversation with us, because at the end of the day, the more people like the folks on this call who understand both where we are and what your/their opportunity to engage in that rulemaking process, the better. So we're going to do this as much as opportunity allows us to do this. And again, the one thing I can reiterate is, to the degree we follow all the legalities in the rulemaking, if you will, we will be pushed to do it as quickly and as quickly as possible.
Also, to piggyback on that, Jason, I would like to mention that we have currently set up an ITEP comments email, which I will provide to you today. It's ITEP, ITEP, comments with an S, at la.gov. Again, ITEP comments at la.gov. Submit your questions there. It will be monitored continuously, and you can be prepared to find answers or FAQs on our website. It's going to be located at ITEP program page, on the ITEP program page, and our website is opportunitylouisiana.gov.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And for all our viewers, we will make sure that we circulate that information to you. But keeping to our time commitment here for you, Madam Secretary and Ms. Porter, thank y'all so much for joining us. This was extremely helpful, and we just appreciate you all doing what you're doing for the state of Louisiana. So thank you again.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
All right.
Thank you all. Now we're going to turn over to the second part of our webinar. And obviously, ITEP is a vehicle that is used tremendously throughout Louisiana. And we're going to bring on the heads of the major business associations whose members probably take advantage of most of the ITEP contracts. So we are going to have Will Green, President and CEO of Louisiana Association of Business and Industry. We are going to have Greg Bowser, President and CEO of Louisiana Chemical Association. And we are going to have Tommy Faucheux, who is President and CEO of Louisiana Mid-Continent Oil and Gas Association. And I see all three gentlemen logged on here. Let me just give a quick mic check. Mr. Bowser, can you hear me?
I can hear you fine, Jason. Yes.
You great. And then Will and Tommy, can y'all hear me as well?
Yes, sir. Loud and clear, Jason.
Great. Well, look, I don't know when you gentlemen were able to log on. Were y'all able to see part of the beginning presentation, as well as Secretary Bourgeois and or Robin Porter's comments?
Yeah, I did. I saw it.
Well, let's just open up and go around the horn. As I mentioned, there's no doubt that I don't have the percentage, but between you three gentlemen and the members of your association probably take advantage of the lion's share of ITEP contracts. That's because one of the contracts, one of the provisions to get a contract is that you have to be a manufacturer, and y'all basically represent almost all the manufacturers in the state. But Greg, let's just start with you. I mean, you've seen the governor's executive order. I know you were there, present at the lobby annual meeting. Let's hear from you and what your members, the feedback you're getting, and your thoughts on the new executive order. And we'll pass the baton, and then we'll kind of get into the weeds on some Q&A.
Sure, Jason. I think for us, when we met with the governor's transition team and talked with them about it, there were a lot of things that we were concerned about with the old executive order. if you remember, prior to 2016, there was not a jobs requirement in the industrial tax exemption application process. Governor John Bell Edwards added that. And that was a provision that created problems from a manufacturing perspective, because as you know, when you're doing manufacturing, as you tighten the manufacturing process to become more efficient, you may, for example, you may be able to make, at the beginning, you may make 100 widgets. It may take 10 people. And as your process gets better, you may be able to make 150 widgets with half that many people. But the investment is still there. And that's what this program was designed to do, was to get huge capital investment. So we were happy to see that they took the jobs provision out of it.
Yeah.
We think that they kind of simplified the process with respect to approval. And so we think all of that was a good move, and I think it'll be much better for the state as a whole. And so we're looking forward to working with this program, working with the administration to do this.
Great, and let's continue around the horn. And just as a housekeeping note, I do see a few questions in the chat feature. After we get through the around the horn with the association heads, we'll kind of discuss some of the questions in that chat feature. I'll give you my best opinion, but I'll also let the heads of these organizations weigh into those as well. Will Green, thoughts from a lobby perspective. This was unveiled at your annual conference. Did you know this was coming?
Yeah, Jason, thanks. Let me say this. Thanks for putting this on, and gosh, the secretary and Ms. Porter did such a good job explaining a lot of the I guess clearing up some of the things and the misconceptions and surrounding this, and really highlighting some of the excitement that we're hearing some of our members. But one of the things the secretary said, that the governor moves at the speed of business. I had to chuckle, and I know Tommy did too here. And as Greg said, we've been discussing the challenges surrounding the rollbacks that the previous administration put in, and some of the roadblocks that the previous administration put in surrounding the ITEP. And so I was fortunate enough to serve on the governor's workforce development transition team. We had those discussions. Jason, I know you and I, as part of meetings that we've had with staff, I know Tommy, I know Greg, we've all met together collectively with the governor's staff on some of the ITEP challenges under the old administration. And so, those conversations have been had going back to when the governor was putting his team together. And so, we had a desire to make these changes, to make the process more efficient, to make the process more predictable, and so that we could continue to grow and attract more of these projects and more of these investments here. And so we had, an indication that conversations were had in the administration. Did we know exactly that the announcement was going to be made that morning in annual meeting? No, we didn't. But again, so excited that the announcement was made. It sends a message, as the secretary said, that Louisiana is open for business. We want to grow our companies here, and we want to attract more of that investment back to Louisiana.
No, thank you for that Will, and I agree with you. I think that's the intent here, is to try to be more competitive with our property tax abatement program and tracking that incentive. Tommy, man, I could go in a number of different directions with you all. Carbon capture's out there, and questions about whether some of that will qualify and those sorts of things. And y'all are embarking upon so many different opportunities in the oil and gas space. But let's hear from you. What are you hearing from the oil and gas community?
Sure. So look, I think the initial reaction amongst LaMoga members and people in the oil and gas and energy space was, a big sigh of yes, this is moving clearly in the right direction. I mean, I shared what Greg and Will said. I mean, we were all there 8 years or so ago when the negative changes were made, and we have, worked hard, I think, collectively to weather some of that. But clearly, I'm sure we've missed opportunities. And so this is a significant step forward. You know, I think what I look at as the signing of the EO, and look, I had to laugh because watching the governor do this live at Will's meeting was reassuring, because he did made a similar action at our meeting a few weeks earlier, where he walks in with this folder with a stack of papers, and you don't know exactly what he's going to do. And of course, at our meeting, he signed action that was aimed at streamlining the permitting process. And I bring it up, one, because it's fun to watch him do these things at our meetings, but you have to, I think, look at it collectively. The ITEP, along with permitting reform, along with, you know, the governor, as you mentioned, carbon capture, has been very vocal of late, supporting, you know, investments in Louisiana around CCS. I think you have to look at all this together. You put that with what Secretary Susan had to say earlier in the call. What I think we're showing is that Louisiana is going to move in a different direction when it comes to attracting business, and get us back to the place that I think we've all been wanting to get to for quite a while. I think you have to look at it all together. Look, from an ITEP perspective, the timing is good, because we will be this year, the legislature, talking about the new investments that come as the energy economy evolves. ITEP, you know, an easier ITEP makes those new investments, I think, even more possible. And so I'm excited about that. I know there are going to be questions. We have to go through this rules process. There was a police jury association yesterday. A lot of locals, some particularly in industrial communities, want to support this, and I think they will. But of course, they have questions, and you know, we'll make sure that we're part of that conversation as we go through the rules process.
No, great, thank you. All very good comments, Tommy. One of the other discussion points I want to get into, and I know you all as associations are very good with messaging and getting the word out, and why ITEP is important to make Louisiana, continue to make Louisiana competitive. But we do hear some of the naysayers out there saying, oh, they got rid of jobs. How can we create an incentive program that creates no jobs, or that doesn't have a jobs requirement? And Greg, just starting with you, I remember having these conversations with you about just how many people the chemical corridor employs in Louisiana, and just because it's not direct jobs, you know, those plants and those facilities are hiring contractors. You have other businesses that are popping up just to help service those plants when the investments get there. So I don't think it's that it doesn't create jobs. I mean, the question is more so, I mean, how many jobs is this thing really creating? And there's also school statistics out there that those parishes with the greater number of ITEP contracts, I mean, we just look not far from East Baton Ascension. The school districts are performing through the roof, you know, and are doing well. So I'd love to hear each of you comment on that.
Jason, I'll start off by saying this. It's very difficult to invest $1 billion in something and not create any jobs or any economic growth at all. I mean, that's just not happening. And when you look at what these facilities do, the people they employ, and you mentioned the contractors, we have a sister association, the Louisiana Chemical Industry Alliance, which is made up of companies that do business with the chemical plant. That alliance has anywhere from 800 to 900 members. These are people that just do maintenance work, do construction work, all kinds of stuff. That's a lot of companies. And, you know, we employ somewhere in the neighborhood of about 30,000 people. You take a multiplier of 5, that gives you an idea of what the number of jobs are. And so it's a heck of an impact that our industry has on Louisiana's economy. You mentioned Ascension Parish. You know, Ascension is probably one of the more affluent parishes in our state. And you look at the tax revenue that's generated in Ascension Parish, it's unbelievable. The schools are unbelievable. The amount of money that goes to law enforcement, the whole thing. And nobody has more tax exempt property for manufacturing than Ascension. So the idea that it hurts education, or it hurts the local school system, or it hurts the local school the local economy is just not a fact.
Will or Tommy, any further comment on that, and just the fact that, some people are saying, oh, well, it's not going to create jobs anymore. But I mean, if you're making multi-million dollars worth of investment, you have to construct that investment. You have to service the investment. So any thoughts from either of you all?
Yeah, Jason. In fact, the stats and the facts kind of speak for themselves. And you can go on our la23.org website and I know, Jason, you helped create and you helped look and kind of dig into the numbers, because we didn't want to kind of use hypotheticals. We actually wanted to really look and do a deep dive into the correlation between ITEP, schools, wages, jobs, and connect those dots. And in fact, 9 of the top 12 parishes in the state for average annual salaries have the most ITEP. If you're looking at correlation between sales tax per capita, parishes with the highest sales tax collection also correlate with the highest ITEP. Property taxes, parishes with the most ITEP correlates to the highest ITEP incentives. And so the reality, as Greg said, is that parishes that invest in ITEP, also have higher wages, higher property taxes, higher sales taxes. And so again, it's hard not to see, when you invest multi-millions and billions of dollars in projects, the trickle down effect. So you're creating new jobs within the plant, but also you have subcontractors and general contractors. And so it's not just the plant that's creating jobs, it's all of the trickle down effect economy that's also having jobs. I mean, it's vehicles that are being bought, it's other widgets that are being created. It's different programs at universities that are growing out of the need for these new skill sets at the community college level and as well as the university level. And so the trickle down economics from these projects and incentives are just hard to argue against, and that's why it's so important. And that's why, quite frankly, look, other states are doing this. And we used to be a leader in this, and we fell behind the last 8 years. And I think that's why you saw this governor, this secretary, so passionate about quickly making this a clearer, transparent, efficient process to attract this growth back to Louisiana.
Yeah. And I'm, oh.
Yeah, well, Tommy, I was just going to say, to build into your answer, you actually have maybe one of the more unique perspectives, because prior to Lamoga, you were working for one of these big facilities. So you've seen the job growth firsthand, right? And you've seen what it has done for a facility like the previous one you worked for. But go ahead, Tommy, I interrupted you.
No, look, I think you're right. And, Greg would, I know, agree here. We see the industry, the petrochemical, the energy industry tends to go through cycles. And, when natural gas prices fell, I'm going back probably 2012, 2011, we saw a significant boom with the use of shale gas, and all of a sudden the chemical sector was booming. We're now, in a new wave of that, as everybody is dealing with this energy evolution and all the decarbonization of the industry. And so, we don't always, going back to the jobs piece, we don't always take the step back that we should and remind people about the impacts we're having outside of the fence lines. I was giving some anecdotal evidence. I was in Thibodeau a couple of days ago with one of our member companies who sponsored a supplier certification program. These were 25 or so businesses across Southeast Louisiana. Went through a 1-year program that this is everyone from catering companies to pipe fitters to transportation companies that were moving employees. All of these companies dedicated time over a year to be part of a program so they could become qualified suppliers of industry. Chet Shatson was sitting next to me from Port Faucheux. A lot of companies that were there are going to do business with the port, which is there to support industry. And so you really have to look beyond the fence line. No industrial facility, no refinery, no chemical plant is operating solely with the residents that live within the parish in which they're located. All of our industry are relying on regional workforces, people who drive, 75 plus miles one way in many cases every single day to make those communities successful. And so we look at an Ascension or a St. Charles who are doing extremely well, but we got to remember the investments that maintain the jobs in these facilities. Those dollars are not just in that one parish. They're driving home with all of these employees across the state every day. And so, I shared that, going back to this meeting I was at yesterday with a lot of these local officials. We cannot look at just any one parish and the economic benefits inside the parish boundaries. We have to understand that all of these investments reach out to the employees who live across the region and the suppliers, as I just mentioned, who come from all over South Louisiana or all over Louisiana as a whole.
Yeah, no, that's great insight, and getting more granular on why ITEP is so important. All right, guys, I'm gonna do something that's probably dangerous here, but in the last 4 or 5 minutes before y'all get, and I'll give y'all a chance to kind of give closing comments and how people can reach your organizations if they want to be involved in stakeholder input. But we did have a couple questions up here. I'm going to go through them, and if y'all have some input, I think the high notes have been hit on them. One was, does local ITEP committee have to be unanimous vote to approve, or is it a majority? I think General Counsel Porter, Executive Counsel Porter mentioned they have not completely figured that out yet. I think that's a great question because you could have 2 of the 3 or 2 of the 4 or what it may be. And we know in the old process, if council approved and school board did not, well, you only got the millages related to the entity that approved. So I think that has to be worked out. The next question, possibly get clarification on whether Governor Landry's executive order supersedes Governor Edwards' order so that the jobs requirement does not apply. So this is a good kind of legal question. Will, I know you're an attorney as well. I think 2 things are at play here. One, we know when Governor John Bell issued his second executive order, it kind of usurped his first executive order, and that was the rules of the game on his second executive order, and the second executive order were the rules of the game. I think because Governor Jeff Landry just issued a new one based on last Wednesday, the February 21st, that is when the new rules go in effect, and potentially those JB rules are no longer in effect. You follow the JB order. Also, importantly, in law, it states that an executive order shall terminate 60 days following adjournment sine die of the regular session of the legislature after the issuing governor leaves office. So we're about to enter the regular session. That JBE executive order is going to expire in its own right, 60 days sine die in any event. The question is, does it expire earlier? Because Jeff Landry just issued a new one. Do any of you all have any further comment or thoughts on that?
Yeah,
Jason. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, look, obviously we can't give anybody legal advice here. I would say check with your counsel, but especially if you're in the middle of this or you just got something approved. But as Jason said, I mean, there is legal ramifications to an outgoing governor and his executive orders. Generally speaking, an executive order like this, and just in general, when a new law passes, it's the latest expression of law. But if you want it to be, there's prospective and retroactive indications. Generally, they have to be said if they want them to be retroactive. There has to be an indication for that. But I mean, I would definitely, if the question is specific to a process that's underway now, that's in limbo and that was started under the old governor's executive order, I would definitely want my legal team looking at that.
Greg, you were going to comment on that?
Yeah, I was gonna say, and one of the things that we have to work through is that, does this executive order, if you filed your application, for example, today, prior to that executive order, there's no action has been taken on it, but you filed it prior to that, does it apply? Does this new executive order apply to it? And the reason I say that is because when you read the executive order, it specifically says, all application filed as of this date.
Yep.
Which indicates to me that, you know, one could make the assumption that everything filed before that is under the old executive order. And so if your application is in there, that gives us some concern when you look at that date being in this executive order, because it specifically says only things filed as of this date, on this date going forward. And again, I full disclosure, Jason, I mean, I'm not an attorney, but I do play one in real life sometimes.
I agree with that, and I think this is a question we're going to have to raise. And essentially what we're saying here is Jeff Landry's executive order starts February 21, 2024. Okay, what happens to those projects that were approved and have these compliance burdens after the Governor Jeff Landry executive order was signed, meaning they were approved under the JB executive order, but we're also potentially saying that executive order, JB, is null and void because it expires. So do you have to still comply with an expired JBE executive order? Who do you comply with? What are the rules? Or does the compliance that bleeds over into the Jeff Landry era are the compliance rules? So I think that's open for debate. And I think that's an area that needs to be clarified.
Hey, or Jason, to complicate it more, Governor Landry's wasn't in effect. Technically, according to the law, Governor Edwards expired. Do you go back before Governor Edwards? You can make that argument.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I think just to my point, more particular, what bothers me is that exactly what that executive order says. It says this shall apply to all applications done as of this date.
Yeah.
So basically, he's basically saying that the rest of them are under other executive orders. I mean, that's where I interpret what's in the truth.
Typically, he uses advances, because we have advances, then we have applications, but it's advances filed on or after February 2021. Next question, and I see we're at the 10 o'clock mark, so I'll try. Will miscellaneous capital additions be allowed? We know Governor John Bell got rid of that. I will tell you that is mentioned right here in section 4 of the executive order. And I'll also mention to you all, and I was talking with Will and Greg and Tommy, there's a lot of things being floated out there about what the order does. I encourage you to read it. Go to the order, go to what the order says.
Always important.
Not what everybody is saying what the order says, because some of these things are written in here, yet they need to be cleared. So second sentence of section 4, applications for miscellaneous capital additions and applications for tax exemptions for maintenance capital, required environmental capital upgrades, and replacement parts. Here's the exception that's about to be built. Except those replacements required in the rehabilitation or restoration of an establishment to conserve as nearly and as long as possible original condition shall not be considered or approved. So MCAs, maintenance capital, environmental upgrades, replacement parts, they still will not be allowed, but replacements required to rehab or restore to the original condition may be allowed. So that's right in section 4 of the agreement. Last question here. Subject to the rulemaking process, what's the intent for current ITEP contracts? I think we just hit that. The viewer is asking what happens to those JBE contracts that fall under the Jeff Landry order. Will the job requirement hold? Let's see if they address that through rule. If so, will there be more leniency applied for natural and honest anomalies, construction delays, delayed hiring, things that have plagued well-meaning applicants under the program? I think this is a great question, and I will just tell the viewer who asked this question, Secretary Bourgeois and this governor seem to want to have a heart for business and industry and those who are trying to create jobs. And if there are anomalies and unintended consequences, things like COVID that happen And by no choice of your own, you can't have so many people working in the plant because that's what an order was sent down. How do those things? You have delays due to fortuitous events that happened in Louisiana. And so I do think this administration seems prone to want to work through those things and not be held to just the literal and black letter of the law. I think common sense will prevail. So that's it for the questions. Greg, Tommy, Will, do y'all have any those closing thoughts, or if people want to get in touch with you, maybe how they can do that?
Yeah, from our perspective, you just go to the website, lca.org. Everything is listed there. We welcome your comments, suggestions on things that we need to be doing. But you can go to our website and visit us there.
Yeah, no, look, thanks for having us on. Feel free to visit lamoga.com. All of our members, many of you reach out to me, Ashley Kane, our Director of Government Public Affairs. Always happy to talk with you guys.
Yeah, and again, Jason, thank you so much for you and your team and the secretary for jumping on and helping. We commend the governor for helping to streamline and simplify this process. I know it's something the business community is important. And lobby.org is how you can get in touch with us, and we appreciate this opportunity. Thanks.
Hey, thank you all, and appreciate all of our viewers and attendees today. Hopefully this is helpful. If you have any comments, questions, want to get engaged in the process, you can reach us at advantous.com. I've put the slides up there for both Advantous Consulting as well as Advantous Law. The two entities will be very engaged, both from a consulting and a legal standpoint. Feel free to reach out to us. Thank you for joining today. We will also submit the information out to all of you that the secretary gave us today if you want to reach them directly. And we will be signing off until our next webinar. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you all for joining us for today's webinar hosted by Advantous Consulting. Advantous is the largest state and local tax consulting company in Louisiana and a leading multi-state tax firm that uniquely delivers customizable end-to-end state and local tax solutions that range from turnkey compliance services to high key level planning and advisory consulting. Our key services include sales and use tax, incentives, property tax, corporate income and franchise, severance tax, and appeals and disputes. Like Jason said, for more information on Advantous, please visit our official website, www.advantous.com, or email info@advantous.com. You can also follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook to stay up to date on tax news and future Advantous events. Once again, thank you all for joining, and thank you to our amazing guest speakers.